Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lahela Maxwell, and I am with the Haley Public Library. Tonight, we are delighted to host local fly fishing guide and certified casting instructor Ed Northen. But before I introduce him, a little housekeeping. As usual, there are 3 ways to enjoy our adult programs: here, live at the library, watching at home live on YouTube, or archived on YouTube later. Also, if you are a library card holder, you will receive a newsletter every week with our upcoming events. Now, some of those upcoming events here at the library: next week, Saturday, April 5th, Joe Yelda of the Wood River Amateur Radio Club will be here for a ham radio workshop from 10 a.m. to 2. Now, learn all about ham radio basics and how to prepare for your operator license. And later on that very same Saturday, April 5th, the Haley Public Library, in partnership with the Boise State University, Idaho Dark Sky Alliance, and the Sawtooth Botanical Garden, will be hosting astronomer Dr. John Moores of York University for a lecture entitled Daydreaming in the Solar System at 5, followed by an evening of stargazing at the Botanical Garden at 8. Now, if you have questions tonight, I request that you please wait to ask those questions until I can run over here and give you the microphone so the people watching at home can hear your question. And I now have the pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. A retired fire captain and paramedic, Ed Northen has spent the last 2 decades here in Haley, Idaho, pursuing his passion for the outdoors and environmental stewardship. Mr. Northen has worked for the last 15 years as a fly fishing guide with Silver Creek Outfitters and has previously served as president of our local Hemingway chapter of Trout Unlimited, a national nonprofit organization devoted to the conservation of freshwater habitats for people and fish. Now, let's reel in our attention for Mr. Ed Northen.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be with you here this evening. So, how many people here have never fished before, done any fly fishing before? Okay. How many people would consider themselves a beginner? They've fly fished a little bit. Okay. Well, then this program is really designed for you. And I pulled this program apart from much longer. It says Fly Fishing 101, which is really, I did over 5 weeks. But I've condensed this down for a 2-hour presentation and to get you started. So I'm calling it Getting Your Feet Wet, all right? So we'll just get started. Feel free to ask questions as we go along. And if you don't, certainly if I use some terminology or something you don't understand, please let me know. So fly fishing, what's fly fishing about? And this is my description of it. It's a journey, and everyone is at a different place. Some people are beginners, some are experts, some people want to catch lots of fish, some people want to catch big fish, some people just want to live, be in the beautiful places where fish live. And the intent of fly fishing is not really harvest or competition, but it is an awareness, an art, and stewardship. Art in the beauty of a skillfully executed cast or a well-tied insect imitation. Awareness of the natural your world surroundings, the insect, the flora, the fauna, the birds, the geography, the hydrology. It can also be a source of meditation where the stresses of life are set aside and the soul is open. And stewardship is protecting and caring for the planet and the river and ecosystems. So enjoy the journey and let's get started. Okay, so the goal, what is fly fishing? Well, the goal is to cast a fly line with an imitation of something in the natural world attached, a fly, presented in a lifelike manner in order to fool a fish into eating an offering. So that's kind of something I pulled off of the website, and we talked about beautiful places to fish. This is the Big Wood River, and there's just lots of places. So let's get started. Equipment. Basically, what do you need to get started with equipment? You'll need a fly rod and reel, boots and waders, fly line and leader, tippet and flies, vest, pack, and accessories. And here's an image of those. And we're going to go through each of those individually and talk about what are those. If you want to fly fish and go out there, what are you going to need? What's necessary, what's not necessary? So waders and boots. There's several different types of waders. The wader that most people wear today is a breathable wader. That's this picture of this wader here. You can get them anywhere from $100 for really cheap waders on sale outlet place up to $800 to $1,000. So that's the wader. You can get neoprene waders for less. Neoprene essentially is the wetsuit material, and they don't breathe, so they're hot in the summer and not as comfortable, but they're really good in the winter when it's really, really cold, and a lot of people like to wear them. The breathable waders, which I talked about, boot attached. Some of the waders are boot attached. You can also just buy the pants or get hip waders. Okay, so a boot, the boots are constructed so that they can be in the water, and they'll have different types of tread on them. And if you're going in the summer, if you're just fishing a small creek, some people will buy a sandal or something like that. So the boot types, the Vibram soles, which would be the rubber sole, a felt sole, which is a sole they use for a long time. They don't like to use that so much anymore because you can pick up diseases from different bodies of water, and you can transport those from one body of water to another. So whenever you would fish in, say, Silver Creek, before you go and fish someplace else, you should rinse your boots off. Make sure that you're not carrying any insects from one to another. And then the boots have different types of lace systems. They have a lace system, a cable. Thank you. The cable, the type that now they have on mountain bike shoes or on some different types of ski boots, or even the sandal type. So, any questions about boots or how you would buy them or anything like that? Okay. And vests and packs. So vests and packs are just what we carry our stuff in. And my friend and I always say, how is it that we get so much stuff in fly fishing? You'd think it wouldn't have that much gear, but you end up with lots of fly boxes and accessories and things. So when you go out for the day, you want to carry those. So there's vests, there's fanny packs, you can have backpacks, sling packs, and there's a backpack there. So all of these are just, they're not absolute that you have to have, but you're going to need something. You can put it in your pockets if you want. But one of these is not better than the other. They're simply a preference. However, I would say a pack, if you're going out for a long time in the day, is nice to have. If you're going to be out all day, you can carry water, you can carry food, you can carry a rain jacket, and extra stuff. So accessories, what are accessories? I've got a photo of some of these, and we'll talk about those a little bit. So hemostats. Hemostats right here, just used for a couple of things, but one is to help unhook the fish from the fly hook. Another thing you can use, you can hold your fly in the hemostat while you try to put it on and thread it onto the fly rod. Hemostats are great to have. Polarized sunglasses are almost essential. You want to wear sunglasses even if they're not polarized, because when you're casting, you don't want something to hit you in the eye, a hook. But polarized will allow you to see through the water and see the fish and where the fish are and what they're using. Nippers, this is a pair of ceramic nippers down here. Essentially like fingernail clippers, except for specialized for fly fishing. They're not very expensive, but you use it to cut your line and your tippet as you're changing your flies. A retractor is nice to have so you don't drop it into the water. Floatant is something you put on the fly to help it float. Dry powders are also help the flies float. And magnifiers, when you get older like me, you need a pair of glasses like these that you can clip up or you can put on so you can see the flies. Because some of the flies we tie are big. Others of them are very, very teeny and small, and we'll be talking about the flies in a little bit. Strike indicators. These are strike indicators, and they're used in a technique called nymphing. And nymphing is when your fly is under the water, and so you can't see when the fish takes it. By having a strike indicator on it, when you throw out bait, people call them bobbers, but we can't have bobbers in fly fishing, so they call them strike indicators. But essentially, it's a small bobber, okay? And it goes onto your line, and it lets you see that a fish has taken it, and then you can set your hook. There's different types of strike indicators. And then split shot, we don't use the leaded split shot anymore. We used another type of split shot, and that's to help add weight to your line so you can get it underneath. A wading staff is nice to have in high water in the winter when it's icy out and it's easy to slip. And some people just like having them because their sense of balance isn't real good. You can use an old ski pole or hiking pole, or you can pay $150 for a collapsible one that folds up and sticks on your side. So those are some of the accessories and what they're used for. So clothing, the clothes we wear while fishing are determined by a number of factors. Okay, one is the weather, the temp, the type of fishing you're doing, the sun protection needed, and personal preference. The good news is that you're going to layer your clothing. You want to avoid using cotton, as we that live in the mountains know. Cotton is not your friend, especially when it's cold out, and if it gets wet, it doesn't dry out. And I always bring extra clothes in my car, so that if something happens, you fall in, you get soaking wet. Middle of summer, it's no real big deal, right? You dry out, you're fine. But if you're in the fall or the spring, or especially in winter, you want to make sure that you have those clothes. And living in the mountain community, you probably have almost all the clothes that you need in your closet. You don't have to go out and buy the $500, fishing jacket with the pockets and all that. You can just you'll have some type of thermal layering system underneath that you can wear. And a lightweight cotton shirt is nice. And nowadays, what a lot of people have, I don't have a photo of it here, are the hoodies, the lightweight shirts that have a hood on it, because you can put the hood up and it gives you good sun protection for your neck and your ears. Living at the higher altitude, skin cancer, and I've had stuff cut out of my face and legs, so clothing. The other thing is I have up there is a hat, and a lot of people wear the ball caps, and that's fine, but it doesn't protect your neck, and it doesn't protect your ears. So everybody has a preference, but there's a lot of different nice brim hats out there that you can wear. You do want to get one, though, that has a strap on it, because if it gets windy, you don't want to be chasing your hat down the river when it blows off of your head. So fly rods, there's lots of different types of fly rods, and these are a few of the companies that make them, not all of them by any stretch of the imagination. You'd have Winston, Sage, Orvis, and Scott, and there's another one I don't have up there, Thomas and Thomas. All those are high-end fly rods, and each of those companies makes an entry-level rod, which is probably these days is probably in the about $400 range to about $1,000. But Echo, Redington, and some other fly rod companies out there, you can get a nice rod from those entry-level rod, or a little higher than entry-level rod, for a few $100s. And they fish just fine. One of the things our Trout Unlimited chapter does is we do youth fly fishing every year. So we own 18 fly rods, and we have a Redington rod that is their entry-level rod. And they cast beautifully, and you can fish with them. And so and I always tell people, start with an inexpensive rod. That's decent. You don't want to be casting a broomstick, but that's decent. And then move up if you really enjoy it. And then you have a second rod to share with a friend, or we'll talk about what the fly rods are about. So fly rods come in a lot of different size, weights and size. Everything from a 1 weight, which is a very, very skinny, lightweight rod that you might use for tiny little fish on a stream, to a 14 weight that you'd catch a sailfish on. And everything in between. The higher the number, the larger the fly rod. The standard weight for fishing for trout is a 3 to 6 foot weight. And I would say, unless you're fishing small creeks and things, or using a longer rod, a 4 to 6 weight rod. 5 weight is a good place to start with a rod. And the rod lengths, they'll come from 7.5 to 10 feet. The standard is 8.5 to 9 foot rod. Most people start with a 9 foot rod. It's marked on the rod down in this part here. It'll tell you what it is. It'll say a 5 foot or a 5 weight, 9 foot. But as people get more specialized, they like shorter rods for a small creek. We were talking about Deer Creek. It's a small area and it's enclosed, so a little 7 foot rod is nice because there's so much brush around and the fish you're catching aren't that big. And usually you'll catch those 2 or 3 weight rods for the shorter rods. The longer rods are used for Euro nymphing. And there's also a rod out there called a Tenkara rod, which is a type of fly fishing. You use flies, but you don't have a reel, and you just cast a long tippet out essentially. But Euro nymphing is a type of fly fishing, and those are 10 feet. And the length and the weight of the fly rod will be found on the body of it. So types of rods, there's fast action, medium action, and slow action rod. And they all have their own place and different uses. I would say a medium action is a good place to start. A fast action rod is really good in the wind. It's good for big flies. And when you're learning to cast, it's a little more forgiving. But once you've mastered the cast, if you put a little more effort into learning to cast well, the medium action rod I think will serve you better unless you're fishing someplace where you're throwing really big flies. Fast casting here, good in big water, heavy flies, tippets. The cons, it's not good for delicate fishing or light tippets because your fish will break you off. Medium, you need a little more finesse to cast, but it's a good all-around fly rod and better for medium to light tippets. And the slow one takes more skill to cast, but it'll also protect that light tippet. So a very fine tippet, you might think of 2-pound test, and you're catching a big fish. If you have a very stiff rod, that line is going to snap. If you have a very slow rod that bends very easily, then it's going to have that give, and it's going to protect that tippet, and the fish won't break you off. So, but they're not as good in the wind or as forgiving. Fly reels, that's used to hold the fly line, and it's used to reel the fish in. So they come in various sizes, standard arbor and large arbor. A large arbor picks the line up faster, but other than that, they're not really any different. Different drag system. An old style system is called a click and pull, and it's not a very good drag system. It doesn't tighten up very well, so it doesn't really have much of a drag on the reel at all. Fine if you're fishing little tiny fish in creeks, but for the most part, you don't really, there's no really need to have that because disc drag systems are on most of the reels. And a disc drag is a different type. There's different types of drags. A spindle type is one type. The other type is where the whole back of the reel has cork on it or a different surface, and that creates the drag. What you do want is the drag should be adjustable and smooth. And if I'm going to spend a lot of money if I'm trout fishing, like here, I would put more money to the rod and less money to the reel. You don't need, Able makes a really nice, a beautiful piece of machine fly reel, but they're also very, very expensive. And some people want that, but you don't need to spend that money. You can spend, just get a good quality reel, and there's lots of them out on the market. So quality of the reel is more important for big fish as far as the drag. Different materials, there's different materials, finishes, and weights. That's going to add expense to it. And then one of the biggest things you want to do is choose out a reel that balances with your fly rod. And usually they'll have a number or something on them. So that reel will be, you want a reel, a 5-weight reel, a reel that will hold like 4 and 5 weight lines, for instance, to go on your 4 or 5 weight rod. Otherwise, it's too heavy and your rod isn't balanced. So it's not going to allow you to cast as well. And when you go to buy a fly rod, sometimes you can get a kit and it's already balanced out, or if you're in a shop, you just talk to the people in the fly shops and they'll help you out. And you can go to the fly shops and cast rods and see what you like, what you don't like. So those are the two components, what we fly fish with, all right? We fly fish with the rod and the reel. But then you have fly lines. Okay, so fly lines come in different types. So we're going to start with a floating fly line. So the fly line is what helps you cast and get your fly out to the fish. Have anybody here, you ever done any spin fishing or ocean fishing where you cast a reel and it has a weight on it and it carries it out, right? So the weight of whatever you're casting, the weight of the lure or of the bait and weight is how you cast. The heavier the weight, the further you're going to cast that out there. And because that monofilament line has no mass to it, it has no weight. That's why you need it all at the end. Fly fishing is just the opposite. Fly fishing it's a weightless fly if you're dry fly fishing. So you would never be able to cast on a filament line out. So you have to, that's why you have a fly line. The fly line has mass to it, and that mass creates weight, and that's what you cast with. And so today the fly lines are, very, very technically made. All these, goes through all these computer mathematics and gyrations, and they have all these different types. You can go onto the reel fly line thing, and they've got 20 different fly lines. And you think, why would I need 20? But some are very, very specific for very specific things. But we're just going to be very general today. So fly lines for floating. A floating fly line is what you normally fish with, okay? That's the one if you want to fish a dry fly or if you want a nymph fish, then you're going to be generally using a floating line. So there's two types of fly lines, floating and sinking. The floating lines, a double taper line is still around. People don't use them that much. But the front part of it, it's engineered so it's not quite as much mass in the front. And when you get back, say 15 feet, it carries more weight than the next line I'm going to show you. And people used to really like these double taper lines because it's a double taper because both ends of the fly line have a taper on them. So when a lot of times you're only fishing the first 35 feet of your line, but it's a 70-foot line. So the rest of it you're hardly ever using. So what people would do is instead of buying a new fly line, they'd just pull it all off and turn it around and reel it back on and use the other end of it. And double taper lines cast well, and there are certainly, it has a uniform what's called belly section, and it's good for short casts and for roll casts, and it can be switched. So I actually have one on one of my reels that I've used for a very specific reason. But the standard line you're going to use when you go in to buy a fly line, it's what's called a weight forward line. And so the front part of the line is called the taper. So it has a longer taper, a shorter midsection, and then it's easier to cast, and it's good for a long cast, but you can't reverse the line. Some of this is a little more technical when you do the 8-9 hour class, but this sort of lets you I want you to be familiar with the terminology of a weight forward line, and that's probably what you're going to want. Then there's shooting heads, which is for distance and competition casting, but you want to use a size that matches the line to the fly rod. So generally, I say generally, if you have a 5-weight rod, you want to get a 5-weight line because they're designed to fish with those. But I would say just once in a while, you get a fly rod that doesn't cast, it's a 5-weight rod and it doesn't cast well with a 5-weight line. And so you need to bump it up to like a 6-weight line, and then it casts fine. In the last fly fishing 101 cast I had a guy out there and he goes, man, I just can't cast. And I took his rod and went to cast it, and he had a 5-weight rod and he had a 5-weight line. It did not cast well at all. I had a 6-weight reel, switched them out, we put it on, and the rod cast beautifully. So, but when you're, but once you know that about your rod, then you know that, and you just adjust. We'll go through this very quickly. Sinking lines. There's lots of different types of sinking lines. A sink tip line you'll use for big, heavy flies to fish what they call streamers. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's used in rivers or still waters for subsurface fly fishing. And then full sink lines, there's a bunch of different types. It's more for a longer class. So attachments, fishing knots. So you have your fly reel. How do you put the fly line on the reel? So you have what is called backing, and we'll talk about backing in just a minute. So you have your backing that goes onto the reel, then your fly line, which is generally 70 to 80 feet, okay? That attaches to the backing. And then you have your leader. Your leaders generally are 7.5 to 9 feet. If you're fishing still water like Silver Creek, you might be fishing a 12 or 15 foot leader. And then you have tippet, which we'll talk about later. That ties on. And these are some of the different knots that you can use. This slide here. We'll talk about knots more in a minute, but a uni knot, or what's called a Duncan loop, and a clinch knot and a surgeon's knot are the main knots that you're going to need to learn. So when I give the class, longer class, we tie not all the knots, but we tie some of these knots. You can go online and watch a video, and it will explain how to tie a clinch knot. And if you've fished before, you're probably already tying the clinch knot. That's for the 5 wraps, and you stick it back to the hole and you pull it. A double surgeon's knot is good to know for attaching tippet to leader. And it's a simple knot, and you can watch that online as well. And then the other one would be the blood knot, or if you tie what's called a double uni knot or double Duncan, it's easier to tie and the same thing. So that's a place where, for this presentation, we're not going to get into, but you can definitely learn or get with people who know how to do that. And it just takes practice. So the backing, here's what backing looks like. It's just this Dacron line, usually 20 to 30 pound test for freshwater fishing. And you use it to allow you to fish a fly line that's about 60 to 80 feet long. But if you get a really big fish on, if somebody says, man, that fish took me into my backing, that means it went a long ways. Well, you would have run out of fly line if you didn't have the backing. Does that make sense? And sometimes you're making a really long cast. If you cast out 50 or 60 feet and then you catch the fly there, that means you only have 20 feet. And if that fish takes off running because it's a big fish, then you can be into your backing fairly quickly. Fly line is attached to the backing on the reel. And the amount you need depends on what type of fishing that you're targeting. 50 to 250 feet. And real small little trout reel, you might even not need it, but you might want to put some on there to take up space. And if you buy this in a shop, they'll put it on for you. If you get a reel and line in a shop, they'll put the backing on for you. Sometimes they don't even charge for it when you buy it. So leaders. Leader is the link between the fly line and the tippet. Any questions on the fly lines? I know that it's a lot of information. I understand that, but my goal is to put the terminology out there, expose you to it, so when you go into a fly shop or to walk in, it's not, oh, I've heard about that. At least I don't have it memorized. There's no test at the end of this. So leaders have different sections to them, butt section, midsection, and the tip of it. So the butt section is really heavy. That's usually 25, 30 pound test. And then the midsection, all these lines taper down. We used to, I still do, tie your own tapered leader with knots. But now you just buy a knotless tapered leader. So you don't have to worry about this so much. But the butt section is the heaviest and it connects to the fly line. And the tippet is the finest and it connects to the tippet or to the fly, depending on what you're doing. So the leaders, could be a straight leader, but generally people are using a tapered leader. And they'll vary anything from 2 to 18 feet. But the standard is about 9 feet. If you went into the shop and said, I want to buy a leader, fly fishing around here, buy a 9-foot leader, okay? And you get more delicate fishing, 12 to 14. And if you're fishing short sinking lines, you might only use 2 to 4 feet of straight leader. And they vary in size and in length. And you just want to match it to the flies that you're using and to the size of the fish that you're catching. Real detailed here. When you buy tippets and leaders, it'll say pound on there, but everybody refers to them by the X factor, okay? And so a 3X leader or tippet would be about 8.5 pounds, and an 8X would be 1.2 pounds. So a much smaller diameter at the very tip of the leader. The top part's still going to be 25-pound test. And so leaders come in different sizes, and then I kind of just repeat myself there. Tapered leaders are usually knotless, and one of the good news is most of the leaders now have what's called a loop-to-loop connection. You used to have tie in a butt section to the fly line, you'd have a knot here and a knot here, and if you change your leader, you had to cut that off and tie in another nail knot and do that to connect it. Nowadays, any of the fly lines you buy have a welded loop in it, okay? And when you buy the leader, it has a welded loop in it. And you just pass one through the other, pull the line through, and it's connected. So it's very easy to change. You don't have to change it. And the nice thing about the loop-to-loop connection also is that if you wanted to switch to a sinking tip, instead of having to have another whole new spool, that's a sink tip line, you can take that leader off and attach a sink tip that has a loop-to-loop connection on it. So those have become very popular, and you don't have to buy a second spool and line and everything else. There are specific reasons and times people want that, but it's, and then tippet is what you put onto the end of your leader. So the tippet is the size of the tippet is what you're fishing your fly with. It's what you tie your fly onto. Now some people, when they fish a new leader, will just tie the fly straight onto the leader. I generally don't do that. And any thoughts why you wouldn't want to do that? And remember, it's a tapered leader, right? It tapers down to what you want, the 5X. Any thoughts? Okay, yeah. So the reason is every time you tie a fly on, it takes 6 inches of line, right? And if you start changing flies, 6 inches, 6 inches, 6 inches, well, you get 12 inches back in. Now the diameter of the tippet is different than what you started with. Does that make sense? Now you cut that back. So by taking and putting on 12 inches of the same size tippet, if it's a 5X leader, you put on 5X tippet of a foot. Now you can change flies, or 18 inches or whatever. Now you can change flies, but you haven't lost any of your leader. So it makes your leaders last longer. And then you also know what size that is. So you can see the picture here. It says 2X, 10-pound test. And so the tippet connects the leader to the leader, and the leader to the flies. So you have your leader, you have your tippet, and then you have your fly. It can be used to lengthen the leader out as well. If you find I need a longer leader, you can use tippet to lengthen that out. You can change the size of the leader. You can change down. So you could, if you start with a 4X leader and you want to fish 5X, you tie a piece of 5X onto it, now you're fishing a 5X leader. So it's a real nice way to adapt. And then vary in the same size as leaders measured So it's like talking about varies in different sizes. The tippets do, like a 5X, for instance. They come in individual spool sizes. So you choose a tippet size to match the size of the flies you're fishing and that you're using. And so how would you know that? How do you determine that? So yeah, you can just take it over and you can show it to them. One thing about this too, you have the so you can see the different sizes and things on there. And those are both the same. So you can see there's 5X, 4X, 3X, 5.5. And so that's how they come. So when we go back and talk about how that, we'll look at how you rig a fly line for fishing later. But you see now where you have your fly line, then you have your leader, and then you have your tippet. Does that make sense? Okay. So basic knots you can use. I showed you that earlier, and these are all basic knots that you can use for tying your flies on. The clinch knot, the double surgeon's knot, Duncan or uni knot. So the clinch knot you use for tying flies on, the surgeon's knot you use for connecting leader to tippet or tippet to tippet. Duncan or uni knot has lots of different uses for it. You can tie flies on with it. You can do tippet to tippet. You can use it to tie your backing onto your reel. It's a very, very universal knot. That's why it's called the uni knot. A perfection loop works with loop-to-loop connections. You can tie that. And then there's the nail knot and the blood knot, and those are a little more complex. So fly rigging the systems. There's lots of different ways to set these up. So you can attach, have a leader and your tippet, right? I'm just going to call it the leader, and then one fly. So you can fish one single fly, a nymph, or a dry fly, or a streamer. That's just one way to rig a fly line, okay? Or you can add additional tippet and fish two flies. You can fish, some people will say dry dropper. They might fish a big dry fly, like in the summer grasshopper, and then fish a dropper and put a nymph underneath. So now they're fishing, if fish are looking up and taking flies on the surface, they might take that dry fly. But if they're underneath and eating food down below, they might take that nymph. So you can fish two flies at the same time in two different zones of the water. And the other thing that big fly does is it acts as a strike indicator, which if that fly goes under the water, it tells you that a fish has taken your nymph, okay? And then you can add weight to that fly line. It can be tied into the nymph with a bead or lead, or you can add the split shot that we talked about, small little weights. Strike indicators, they'll be in foam, yarn, plastic, wood, or what's called a cider. It's a colored line that you can just tie in. And these are different types of, this one is rubber, these are thingamabobs, these are older style. This one they use specifically for a different rigging system, and there's different types of yarn. So when I was talking about how we fish those flies, so a single fly, double fly, dry wet, single wet, double wet, and this is how you would fish it. See how there's the grasshopper up on top, and then underneath you have a nymph. So that's what that would look like. And in the longer class, we practice tying these up. Here's the dry with a dropper. So you can see, you can adjust the length of that dropper however you want by using that extra tippet. If you're fishing 3 feet of water and you want that to get down and the water's slow enough, you can use a longer tippet and just put it underneath. If you're fishing very shallow, then you might just only use 6 inches. And we talked about the rigging. Remember, I was talking about your fly line, your tapered leader, Then somewhere up on the leader, you would put a strike indicator if you had a strike indicator that you wanted to use, if you weren't using a dry fly. And then down below that, you would have your weight and then your nymph. Usually the weight will go about 8 inches above the nymph fly. A lot of the nymphs are weighted, so you don't have to put a split shot on. This is how you would do that. And I have here indicators set at a depth plus of the water plus 2 to 3 inches. So generally they say if you're fishing and you want to put your strike indicator on, you want to put it on 1.5 to 2 times the depth of the water. So if you're fishing at 4 feet of water, then you're going to want to have your strike indicator either at 6 or 8 feet on because when you're fishing a nymph, generally it's not straight down. Ideally it would be straight down, but because of the current and the water and everything, it's usually traveling at an angle. So if you don't have enough, if you have that strike indicator too low, the fly won't get down to the bottom, which is generally why you're fishing a nymph, is the fish are eating down lower. 90% of the feeding for a fish goes on subsurface. Generally, as a general rule, unless you see a hatch out and bugs out on the water, fish aren't going to be taking flies on the surface. The only exception would be if it's hopper season or early in the year and there's ants and beetles and stuff out and you're fishing those types of fly patterns, then it'll be opportunistic. But generally, they're going to be taking something underneath the water, which is why nymph fishing is so productive. And this is essentially the same thing, but a double rig system in a different way. We're not going to get a lot into that. It's for a little more advanced class. So a little entomology, which just means bugs, okay? You ever gone into the river and picked up a rock and then looked underneath of it and seen the bugs on it? So those are the bugs that live in the stream. And I'm just going to throw these names out there. You don't have to memorize them, but some of the bugs that live in the streams are mayflies, caddisflies, stoneflies, midges, leeches, damsel and dragonflies are in still waters. You have crustaceans and you have small fish. So those all live in the water. Then you have insects that live around the water, but not in the water. And you call those terrestrials, terra for land. Grasshoppers, ants, beetles, mice, frogs, even small ducklings for these great big giant brown trout that live over in Silver Creek or other places. And all of that is food for fish. So just to introduce you to it, you don't have to memorize it, but just so that you're aware of it, because when you go in the fly shop and you look and there's 1,000 flies in the bins, it's daunting. It's like, well, what? And then people start throwing the Latin names around. Well, what? You don't need to know all of that stuff. So we'll talk about those in a little bit. But the stages of an insect life, how an insect lives in the water, starts as an egg, then it goes to a larva. So you can think of that as the caterpillar, right? And it grows under there. Some of them shed their exoskeleton, some of them don't. Then after they're ready to become adults, the pupa becomes a pupa, and which becomes an emerger, which means it emerges from the bottom, living in the bottom, up to the surface of the water. Okay? So as it emerges up, their bodies fill with a gas bubble for mayflies and caddisflies, and they come up through the column. And fish will feed on those because they're extremely vulnerable, but you can't see it. So that's when all the observe. One of the remember I was talking about, the very first slide talks about being an observer. And that's where you're observing and one of the fun things is what's going on in the river? Why are the fish doing this or why are the bugs doing that? And then you have the adult stage, which is the dun stage. And then the dun, once it flies off, the mayfly duns stop eating, and they only live for a day, maybe a day and a half. And during that time, it's called a spinner, and their bodies becomes translucent. And then the spinners will mate, and then they'll fall back onto the water. And the reason I want to let you know that is the fish are eating all those different phases, the bugs at all those different phases. So with a little bit of knowledge, you can key in onto the type of fly that you want to fish. Now, not all insects have all the stages. Stoneflies crawl out onto the rocks for emergence at night, so they don't have an emerging stage. They go out, and stoneflies look like a prehistoric bug. They're huge, 4 wings. Again, not a test. It's an exposure for you, so you can kind of understand a little bit. Understanding the life stage of the insects can help you better determine what the fish are feeding on and what's going on underneath the water. And here's just a picture of the different stages. The eggs, the nymph stage, the emergers, stonefly crawling out, up the dun stage, spinner stage, mating, and then the female drops down, lays its eggs. Sometimes they dive under the water and lay their eggs. The caddises do. And then they have a dead spinner floating on there. And so these happen at all different times of the day. So down at Silver Creek, you might have 2 or 3 different bugs all hatching at the same time. And they're maybe in a little bit different stages. And those fish might just be keying in on one of those stages for some reason. And the fishermen are out there just driving them nuts because they're like, how come they're not taking my fly? Well, because they want that little PMD emerger, not the Baetis emerger. And this is bugs that trout eat. So the different bugs that they eat, we've talked about, this has a picture of all the different phases, but the 4 types of bugs out there, and all the flies you see in the fly shops are for that, you have mayflies, and those have an upright wing and 2 or 3 tails. Okay, their wing looks like a little sail. You have caddis flies. Caddis fly looks like a moth that comes to when you turn on the light at night on your porch, and they fly up. The caddis flies have a tent-like wing and are bushy, okay? You have midges. They're on the river 24/7 all year long. In the winter, it's one of the primary flies. You have stone flies and salmon flies, which are very large, 4 wings, prehistoric looking. They crawl up onto the rocks. If you go this June or July, after the water starts subsiding a little bit, you go walk along the edge of the rocks on the river, and you'll see these big shucks about this big. And those are the shucks of where the stoneflies have come up onto the river and come out of their exoskeleton. So those stoneflies, and then you have terrestrials, which are the grasshoppers and all of those. Those are the 4 types. So when you go into the fly shop, or you're out fishing, those are what you're trying to imitate. There's lots of different types of mayflies. There's lots of different types of caddis flies. There's lots of different, and then the stoneflies and salmon flies are pretty basic. And then there's a variety of terrestrials, ants, beetles, grasshoppers. So mayflies, there's a Latin name, you don't need to know it, but it has upright wings, slender body, 2 or 3 tails, and that's what a nymph looks like. Okay, and the spinners will have translucent wings. Again, caddisflies, there's what they look like, tent-like wings, long antennas, a lot of forms. When you pick up the rocks and you see cases under there, sticks and wood, that's a case caddis. They're larvae, and they grab the sticks and the stones, and they build their little cases, and they live under the water. And they all have the 4 stages as well. Stoneflies, you can see the big stonefly, and that's what they look like. Stoneflies on this river, you'll generally fish in June. On the salmon river, you might fish them in July, and they have it's a real big thing. I mean, when the stoneflies or the salmon fly hatch comes off, people from all over the country come to the western rivers to fish them because they're big, huge flies, and the fish take them very aggressively. Around here, the hatch for the really big fly is every June, about 1.5 weeks into June, down on Silver Creek, they have a brown drake hatch. And you'll hear about it, and it's just a literal zoo. People from all over come to fish, and it's I don't like fishing it because there's just so many people out there. But it's a really neat thing to go down. They hatch in the evening. You know, you go down and here are these, and it will form literally mats of insects bigger than this table will be floating down the river. That's how many bugs there are out there. And they're big flies. They're size 10 or 8. And then there's midges. Midges can be quite large in lakes, but generally in the rivers and the spring creeks, they're much smaller. Again, this is just an exposure for you so you understand that. If somebody says, oh, we're fishing zebra midges, they're fishing a midge nymph. And it's a very simple pattern, and it's a very effective pattern. And then grasshoppers, beetles, ants, and others. And those are good on windy days when the water's coming up and changing, especially in spring. In winter, you're not going to catch anything on any of these terrestrials, because they're all under the snow. Damselflies, dragonflies, on ponds and waters, really good around there. Worms, we don't fish worms, but they have what's called a San Juan worm or squirmy wormies. And high water, you know, when it rains and you go outside, there's worms all over your driveway and your lawn. Well, they're doing the same thing in the river, and the fish are eating them. And, you know, people fish with worms. So, I mean, and these are just other things, crustaceans, minnows, mice, and they're found in and around the water. So we'll go through this kind of quick. Flies, you have dry flies on the surface, and a wet fly is subsurface. So dry flies, again, we've talked about those phases, emergers, duns, and spinners. Wet flies are nymphs, emergers, if you're using the flies, a soft hackle, which is a type of an emerger, or a streamer. You'll hear all of these names. These are the different types of flies that you can buy in the shop. So they say, oh, they're taking PMD emergers. Well, an emerger and it's a mayfly emerger. That's in about a size 16 to 14 to 16. Generally, they'll PMD, pale morning dun, which means it has a yellowish body. This would, if you're looking at a fly that looked like that, that's a spinner, okay, PMD spinner. That fly over in that corner is a mayfly. That's a red quill. And then this down here is a nymph. That's a very old pattern. It's called a hare's ear nymph. Very effective, very popular, really good, especially when caddis are out. Flies come in different sizes, from size down all the way down to size 32, which you can't even see. You know, larger than a size 2, which is a giant hook. And these are some of the standard patterns that you might see out there. You don't have to remember all of them, but a parachute Adams is a classic mayfly pattern. A royal coachman's an attractor pattern, nothing specific. Fish just tend to eat it. A stimulator can be a stonefly. It can also be a caddis fly. Elk hair caddis. That's the standard caddis fly. It's different sizes, but that's a dry fly. A Griffith's gnat is the midge. All right, it looks like a cluster of midges, and it's a very effective. Parachute hare's ear is another effective pattern. So if I was to send somebody in and say, buy some flies, here are some real good basic flies to have. And then these would be nymphs, caddis nymphs, prince nymphs, pheasant tail nymphs, a soft-hackled nymph, a zebra midge, and a hare's ear nymph. Those are all classic patterns. You can't go wrong with these. And almost all the patterns that you see out there are premised off of some of these. And I was fishing on the Madison River one time. I went over and I talked to a guy, and I said, well, what are you fishing with? Yeah, have you caught anything? Yeah, I caught a couple. And he says, what are you fishing with? Oh, I'm using the green machine, something this or that or other. And I went, well, can I see the fly? Because it's like, I don't know what these crazy names that people come out with. And I look at it, I go, okay, it's a green serendipity. Serendipity is a classic pattern. And somebody just used green thread instead of the classic serendipity is red or a red thread on it. But they had to put their name on it because, oh, I invented this fly. No, you didn't invent anything. You used a different color thread. But the reason I kind of just want to expose you to this is because when you go in and look at the fly shop, there are all of those bins. But essentially, they're imitating one of those 4 basic genus of flies. Now the mayflies can be very tiny to very, very large. And if you can look at the hatch charts and stuff that the rivers have. So fishing, let's get to what we like, and that's fishing. So she was just in here, right? And that's our dog. It's up in Canada on a big, beautiful river that we like to go up there. So fishing really consists of these components: casting, presentation of the fly, setting the hook, playing the fish, landing and releasing the fish. So each of those are a different skill set that are all part of fly fishing. And you learn those. That's why I say fly fishing is a journey. And you learn a little bit at a time. So other components of fly fishing. Knot tying, we talked about tonight. Types of casting, there's different types of casts that you can learn. Types of presentation, you learn how to read the water, how to present your fly. You want your fly to look natural. You don't want it just out there willy-nilly because the fish aren't going to take it. So there are specific ways you present how to read the water. Where do fish hold? How do I fish this type of water? How do I approach this type of water to fish it accurately? How do I decide the best tactical place to fish from? Different types of water. There's different types of water to fish. There's spring creeks. There's tailwaters. There's, like the Bigwood River, freestone waters. There's reservoirs. There's mountain lakes. There's small creeks. So there's all of those are part of the fly fishing world. And so anything about fishing, I mean, I didn't get into the actual parts of fishing because this is intended more just to expose you to a lot of this information. What I would suggest you do, and we're going over this fast, is every year all the fly shops and some of the different angling people like 5B anglers will do it'll be some kind of name like Fly Fishing 101. And generally it's a 1 or 2 day class, and you go there and you'll get exposed to this, but then you get to do a lot of hands-on. Here's how you tie the knots. Here's how you put a leader together. We're going to go out and cast. And then maybe you get to put some time on the river. But one of I would encourage you to do that. Get with a friend who knows how to fish. This is a basic, can you get me out? And a lot of it is just learning by doing. Next month we'll be doing a fly casting part to this. So if you're interested in that, you have to sign up because it's going to be limited to 10 people. But just getting some good basic casting techniques, being exposed to those, and to get to practice it with a casting instructor. I'll have other people there to help me. Can get you started on the right path. I learned to cast on my own. And when I went to take my casting instructor course, oh my gosh. I could put the fly exactly where I wanted it and hit my target, but everything else was all wacky, and they're going, we can't make you an instructor. I hit my target. You go, yeah, but there's a lot more to it than that. And so it's about being efficient and then, of course, learning how to teach and things. But so that casting element is a lot of it. I have some cards for you here, and you can, after this is over, you can come and pick them up. It's an etiquette card. So let's just talk a little bit about etiquette on the river. Yes. So angler etiquette, this is a new card that some of the guides wanted to put together to help ease tensions out on the water. The river's getting kind of crowded, and people are out fishing, and some people just don't understand the etiquette of fly fishing, especially if they've come from a place for spin fishing where people are fishing right next to each other, on a lake or something. So angling etiquette fosters goodwill. So access points. So you can, to find out where you can fish on the Bigwood River specifically, you can go in like Silver Creek Outfitters or some of the other outfitter shops. I know Silver Creek has them, and it's also on the Trout Unlimited website and the website for Project Bigwood are maps that show accesses to the Bigwood that you can legally go into the river on. And those accesses were provided by the county when they allowed the development to take place. And one of the things our Trout Unlimited chapter does every year, every spring we go and we make sure the signs are in there with the regulations at the access on it, and we clear the accesses so it's a clear path. And then, so the first is, if you pull up to an access and you see 3 cars in the parking lot there, it's probably time to go look for someplace else to fish because it's going to be crowded. Private property, you want to respect private property rights, stay on the access trails within the riverbed, which means the mean high water mark. So not the high water mark in the 2017 flood, because that was in people's houses, but the mean high water mark. And you have a right to be in that water. And sometimes people will post a sign up and say, trespassing. Well, if it's right there on the edge of the river, you have a right to access that. And if they've altered the stream bank, what they call rip-wrapping, where they put a whole bunch of rocks in there, they've altered that stream bank, then you have a right to walk on top of that within 15 feet of that to access around it to get back into the river. You're not supposed to really sit on there and fish from them, but you can get around, because when they do that, it might make that water so deep you can't pass through. So that's, for Blaine County, that's a rule. Not in every county, but in Blaine County, that's a rule. You want to communicate, so check with anglers that are already there or present. If they're, find out are they fishing upriver, then take the downriver route, kind of a first come, first serve. It's just a courtesy out there. And then you want to give them space, give them elbow room and aim for 2 or 3 runs above where they're wading. Wade thoughtfully, don't wade carelessly, because you're going to spook fish. And that's just good for you, even when you're wading, because especially like at Silver Creek, if you get in there making a bunch of noise and splashing around, there's not going to be a fish around for a long ways, so you're not going to get anything. Give space to fellow anglers and aim for 2 or 3 runs apart, and we talked about that. Keep fish wet, we'll talk about that a little bit more. 5 seconds or less for a photo, release with care, and fish barbless if you're releasing fish. Everybody wants to get a picture of them, especially if you get a big fish. First of all, if you get a big fish, you've probably played him for a longer time, and with climate change. So if you want to get a picture, keep the fish in the water, in the net, have it ready to go, have your person with the camera set up, ready to take the picture, then you can lift them up, you can take the picture and you can put them back in the water. And that's, that's a good way to take a photo. Nowadays a lot of people are always looking for that water drops coming off the fish or off your hands and stuff. Because you see guys and they're holding it up here and they're taking the fish, trying to get the fish out, and it's up there for a minute and it's stuck and they're using a barb, and that fish is not going to live. So, keep them wet. And then other users, public lands and waters for all, so be courteous, other recreationalists on the river. If you're out fishing on the Bigwood, it's July, you're going to have people coming down in rubber duckies and everything else, and that's just the way that it is. Might be on the water, they shouldn't, if you're fishing, they shouldn't come up and throw a stick in the water for the dog to go in. They need to be courteous as well. And if that happens, it's happened to me, and I've explained it to people, said, there's a kind of a general rule of use here. If I'm here already fishing, and I shouldn't come up and fish where you're sitting in the water swimming or something. But a place where it's really become important is on Silver Creek, because there's a lot of paddle boarders and people tying float tubes together and floating down, and canoes, and they're going right over the fish or right over where people are fishing, and there's been, so it's one of those things that we're addressing. And so some of the organizations in the valley that are taking care of the river or are good resources for angling. Project Bigwood is looking specifically at the Bigwood River. They have a lot of things going on now. You look at their website and doing water monitoring and some projects. And our Trout Unlimited chapter has done lots of projects. We have monthly programs the first Wednesday of every month. This week it's going to be a person speaking from Silver Creek, and he's going to be talking about opportunities to do some volunteer work down there and some of the things that are going on. It's a new Silver Creek Preserve manager, so have a chance to meet him. And we have a raffle and let you know about things that are going on, opportunities in the valley. 5B Anglers is an angling group in the valley. There's a membership. You can go to the stuff without a membership, but it's $35 a year. And they do a lot of outreach and engagement. And so our Trout Unlimited chapter and 5B Anglers works very closely together. We do some financial support to help them with some different things. And then the Nature Conservancy, which is, of course has been around a long time, they're a conservationist, Silver Creek Preserve. And our Trout Unlimited chapter provides volunteers for them for work days. I do water sampling for them. Once a month I go down and collect water samples, and we do lots of stuff for them. So we all work together for the health of the ecosystems in the river. And keep them wet fishing practices. So I talked about a little bit. I have a phone bag here, and the phones are getting bigger, so your phone might not fit in there now. But if your phone doesn't fit in there, your electric car keys will, so you don't get them wet. And or you can put anything you want in them, a candy bar. But it's just some things on there, these to remind you. Don't play the fish to exhaustion. Keep the fish in or over the water when you take them out and you want to get a picture. Fish with barbless hooks, preferably. Remove the hook with the fish in the water. Use a rubber net, these rubber nets here. And the other nice thing about the rubber nets is your hooks don't get stuck in them. So the rubber nets are clear, they don't scare the fish when you're trying to net them. And also they don't have all the knots and stuff in it, so that it rubs the slime off of the. You want to take photos of fish in the water, of fish in the water, or set up for the photo prior to that. And then prior to releasing the fish, you want to hold it facing the current. You always want to, anytime you handle the fish, you want your hands to be wet. Because a dry hand against that slime, the slime will go, the protective barrier will go onto your hand. So always wet your hand before you handle the fish. And if you hold it, fish facing the current, it helps them oxygenate a little bit better. Especially, sometimes you just put them in, they swim right off. But once in a while they get a little tired.
I have a question about facing. You mean when you say having the face fish the current, their face is facing upriver? Is that what you mean?
That's correct. So it would be facing upstream.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, cool. Yeah.
And if you're in still water, you can move the fish back and forth. And just, give it a chance to survive. And a lot of times I just hold it and I just let them recover in my net until I see them swimming a little bit. They're in the water swimming around in it. And then questions. Lots of material, I know. So you can come up here and get chocolate eggs, and that's Trail Creek Pass, a beaver pond, water. There's just so many different wonderful environments. What I love is that last thing I talked about is I just love being out in the environment. And one of the things I tell people is what fly fishing does is it helps you begin to notice. It's because you go, oh, there's bugs under the rocks, and you start looking, and then you learn about the bugs, and you see the bugs flying around in the river, and then the hatch takes place, and you see the birds coming off of the trees, and they're eating the bugs in the air, and you go, oh, I wonder what kind of bird that is. Oh, that was a cedar waxwing. Oh, that was a Hemingway flycatcher. Oh, that was this type of bird. So you start learning the birds. Oh, there's a dipper over on the side. Oh, I saw some swans yesterday. I was down sampling on Silver Creek. I saw 4 swans flying right over my head. Red-tailed hawks or all these. So you start looking at it. Oh, what type of trees are growing in this habitat? Oh, that's this type of a willow, or that's a water birch, or that's this. And then you just become more and more conscious of the environment and of our river and what makes for a healthy river. And the last thing that I'll say, I didn't have a slide for it, but that climate change is really impacting our fisheries in this country. As it gets warmer and warmer, that means the snowpacks are going to be higher and higher and less. So one of the things that Trout Unlimited has done is establish across the country, there's like 400,000 people in Trout Unlimited. It's a national organization. And we do work all over the West and all over the country. Lots of people in the West. But what they're doing is some of the places that when they've set up is called priority waters. And one of the priority waters are cold water refuges in the higher places that we really need to make sure you protect those ecosystems. So you don't want mines getting built there. And you want to maintain, because those cold water refuges are what are going to help keep cold water all the way down into the stream. And if you've ever looked at any climate change models, you look at 35 or 50 years out, we're not going to have snow in Sun Valley. It's not going to be high enough. It's only going to be up at the higher elevations in 50 years if the changes continue to go as they are, which means the habitats are going to change and the fish are going to change. And when the water is warmer, one, you're probably not going to catch the fish because the fish aren't going to be active when it's warm anyway, but the oxygen content is lower, the fish tire out a lot faster, and fish survival after that. So if the water gets above 65 degrees, I just take a thermometer with me. I just don't fish. Above 60, I really don't fish. I mean, it's just too warm. It's too hard on the fish. But that's going to impact our fish, and it impacts the type of fish. Brown trout survive better in warmer water than rainbow trout do. So as the river warms up, you see the brown trout population increasing on the Big Wood River. So it's really interesting to see all of those things. Well, we don't really have too many invasive species in the Big Wood River here. The biggest invasive species we had some people dump carp into one of the private ponds, goldfish and stuff, and Fish and Game had to go collect them because it did connect to the Big Wood River, but it was a year they didn't have the flood, so it was actually the pond down in Hegel Park down here, so they had to go kill everything in there to get rid of those, so they wouldn't get into the Big Wood River system. But there's other fish in the rivers too besides that. The Wood River sculpin actually is a specific species of sculpin that's found nowhere else, and they're in this river. And 2 years ago when we had the big drought and the irrigators pulled all the water off of the river below Glendale Diversion, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of those sculpins all died. We did a fish rescue down there. That year we rescued 23,000 fish between the Big Wood River canals and the river itself. But the sculpin are down in the rocks, in the bed of the rocks, and you can't say net them. And so, and they just died. They repopulate, but and then there's dace and different fish that live in the rivers here. I guess a invasive species would be smallmouth bass. Smallmouth bass tend to be more of a warm water fish. There are some in Magic Reservoir, and some of them have moved up into the Littlewood River. So now Fish and Game has changed regulations on that. And it used to be they had a limit on those that you could keep. Now it's bag the limit, keep as many as you want, because we don't want them in the river system, for the time being. And around the West, that's happening in lots of different places. Then you have fire, that impacts river systems. And so there's lots of threats to that, which why the organizations that I talked about are all looking after the watersheds and the cold water ecosystems and the different things. So give them your support and engage with any of those. And I thought I had, let me see, I think I have. I put some questions up here for me to ask you. That's what this was, okay. So a good starter fly rod would be what length or what action? 9 foot length. Weight? 5 weight? Yeah. Yep. correct. So a standard type of fly line is floating. What weights? Remember? Weight forward, okay. Floating is right, correct. A weight forward is the standard floating line. Yeah, good. Just a review. So what's the difference between a leader and a tippet? I'm sorry?
One's in the middle and one's at the end?
Right, well, one connects to the end. So the tippet is on the little spools that I passed around. The leader is a long single piece. Right, exactly, good. Okay, just to review. In order to wade in cold water, really cold water, what gear is needed? What would you need? Waders and boots. Yeah, and warm clothes, correct, right. The appropriate clothing for whatever the temperature is. 2 knots to try to learn, I talked about. One is double surgeons, good. And what?
Davy? Is that one of them? Davy?
A davy?
Did I make that up?
No, davy is a knot. You're correct. Davy is a knot, Orvis ties. It's a little bit different one. It's a good knot, yeah. But the clinch and then the double surgeons and the clinch is the now people say, here's a little hint in tying. We won't tie them today, but when you're tying a clinch knot, you run the line through the fly, and you're holding it, and then you wrap the fly line or twist the fly 5 or 6 times. And then it leaves a little loop by where the fly is. You take the tag end, that's left, put it through that loop, and then the mistake everybody makes is they pull the tag end and think the knot is set, and it's not. So then the knot can slip off. You hold the tag in and you pull the fly line. That will lock the knot off, and that knot's going to hold fine. Because they came up with the improved clinch, and it's a pain to tie, and it isn't any stronger. So if you hold the tag in and pull your fly line, you'll have a good knot. There's plenty of other knots. When Carmen was sitting there, she said the Larry knot is a quick short story. I learned this knot a long time ago, and I thought I like that. It's called the Pitson knot. And so I learned, and I told Carmen, she was guiding, and I said, well, you should tie this, learn it. We did a test, and it's stronger than the clinch knot, and I think it's more adaptable, more other uses. She goes, no, I like the clinch. I go, that's fine. So it was our anniversary, and we had gotten a guide trip, and we were up fishing with this guide, and he says, I found this new knot I want to tie. And he shows it, well, it's the Pitson knot, right? And she goes, that's a really neat knot. And I go, I've been telling you to tie that one for years. And so she calls it the Larry knot, because Larry was the name of our guide. So, it's just kind of a running joke with us. But she uses it now, and a lot of the guides that I've taught it to have fished it. And some old timers go, oh yeah, I know that knot. It's a good knot. So, yeah. So, but the clinch knot and the double surgeons, and also the uni knot is very, very good. You can use a uni knot for a lot. And then 2 accessories that you might need. What? Hemostats, okay, and what might be something else? Nippers, right. Hemostats and nippers. And those actually are 2 things you should have. You want nippers and hemostats, definitely. 4 main bug types, a little tougher. A midge, okay, A mayfly, okay. What looks like a moth, starts with a C. Caddisfly, right? Stonefly, right. Stonefly or salmonfly. Great, good review, okay. Just hit points. And etiquette rules, we talked about list a couple of the etiquette rules.
3 cars move on.
Right? Right? Yeah. Good. Don't jump on top of people, right? And keep them wet, guidelines. Right? What kind of a net? Maybe a rubber net, right? Yeah, yeah. And when you're taking photos, make sure you're set up and prepared. Great. Okay. And then these were some of the resources I talked about. Local fly shops, support them. They're a great source of local information. You go on their websites, and and they'll say, you'll be some sort of what's working. In other words, a report for the month, a fishing report, and it'll talk about, and it might say, when opening day, for instance, at Silver Creek, they may say, well, the PMDs, pale morning duns, are out. There's some betas. They're seeing some midge. Another type of mayfly on a still water is a speckle-winged quill, and they might have that there, and they'll say some other nymphs are working. But it'll talk about. So what it does is it takes all of these different mayflies, and it might isolate it down to 2 or 3, and then it'll say the size of the hook or the different flies. So those are always a good source. Trout Unlimited, get engaged and informed, and TU.org. 5B Anglers is good for engagement and opportunities, and Project Bigwood, good information on restoration and on studies that are going on the river. They work with kids and stuff too. And then here's a couple upcoming events. On the 2nd of April, we're having Hemingway chapter's having a meeting. It's at the Argios Theater. It's free, 5 to 7, and the topic is Silver Creek. 5B Anglers is going to have a fly tying class. You can sign up for that. That's on April 3rd. Go to their website. And then there's going to be a casting class that we already talked about. And in May, there will be more opportunities coming up. That's it, unless we have any more questions, and I think we did that, so, yeah. Well, thank you for attending, yeah. And so I know it's a lot of information and not much hands-on, which isn't the way I prefer to learn, but in this type of setting, it's the best. That's where the one-on-one classes really do help.
Thank you so much, Ed. Thank you guys for coming. And as you saw, the casting class is on the 24th. It is limited to 10 people, so if you guys are interested and want to sign up for it now, I can take your name and information. Otherwise, for those of us watching online, please email library.staff@haleypubliclibrary.org, or you can call us at 208-788-2034. All right, you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you.